Hi, hope all of you are doing well and keeping yourself safe. I often remember us saying that opportunity is everywhere. The key to develop is a vision to see it. This whirlwind of opportunity is something that to me and possibly my generation is almost magical. To be able to witness disruption through AI, blockchain, IoT, and even hear about the potential of 5G and what it can do for the world. For you, who's a digital world native, you're surrounded by such informative and interesting, relatively easily available, tangible, technology enabled learning mediums. So, not only do you have an opportunity to learn about emerging technologies, but also experience them. We have some very interesting sessions lined up for you in the emerging tech space. AI has been around for decades. Today, it's being used in applications such as video games, fraud protection, spam detection in emails, search engines, and generally impacting so many areas of a daily life. Given the current pandemic, healthcare is looking at integrating AI in a big way for predictive health monitoring, improvements in diagnosis, treatments, etc. The Internet of Things is an expansive network of things or devices that are connected, which facilitates their intercommunication. IoT is helping bridge the gap between the physical and digital spheres. It's basically creating relationships between things and other things and people and other people, all done to make our lives easier, more efficient, and more effective. 5G is the fifth generation technology standard. If I have to say this simply, I believe it's smarter, faster, and more efficient than anything else we've ever seen. So you can hope for data speeds that far outreach the fastest home brand network which is currently available to us. The more we make use of technology to make our lives better, the more important understanding privacy and security becomes. So welcome to these sessions, and I hope you'll enjoy learning about these technologies from our experts at Intel as much as we enjoyed putting these master classes together for all of you. You're the generation which will shape our future. Thank you and have fun.
Hi everyone, welcome to the session. So we're going to talk about IoT and artificial intelligence. So these are the two words, right? The Internet of Things and sensors and artificial intelligence that you have been listening every day, right? It's pretty much become ubiquitous in your life. You have heard about it and how it is helping us in all facets of the lives. It could be healthcare, it could be our daily life, our office, our agriculture, or the way you're doing business or e-commerce or finance or anything like that. So today, let us spend some time trying to understand what are the various things that's making into this IoT. What exactly is it? And what exactly is artificial intelligence? We're going to keep it very basic and we'll look at more examples so that we actually understand it, the multiple layers around it. So what we're going to do about it today, right? So we'll first, when you take an IoT system or artificial intelligence, right, it's all about gathering data, right? How are you taking some data? Where are you getting it? And what are you going to do with it, right? So you just have one input. There is something, there's only so much that you can do. But if you have like thousands and thousands of inputs, maybe there is something else that you can do about it, right? So let us see what it is. So we look at sensors. That's the fundamental one from which you are picking up the data, right? And once the data comes in, how are we going to use it and what kind of actions that we are going to do about it, right? So all the topics will be around that and we'll be moving between among them itself. So the first thing is sensors, right? So I'm sure everybody has seen and have a mobile, right? So do you think how many sensors are inside your mobile phone? Just imagine, right? You're using GPS, right? You're using navigation. So what does it mean, right? You have an accelerometer, you have a GPS, you have so many sensors which are connecting your communication sensor, which are coming to which is communicating to the satellites and actually is guiding to you, right? You're counting your steps every day, right? So there is a pedometer. And when you take the phone, it automatically turns on, or when you give it to your ears, it actually closes. So there's a proximity sensor, there's a temperature sensor, magnetic sensor, right? Whole bunch of things that are there about it, right? So this is the data that you're coming in. Right? So the data you're gathering can be coming in from multiple facets. It can be from a physical device, or the data can be the digital one that we're occupying, right? We are taking the data from somewhere, we're maintaining records, and then we're accessing it for further information, right? So both the types. Let us think of a simple example, right? When you say a sensor, right? So this has your mic, right? A simple mic, right? When you talk, it knows, and you adjust the volume, right? How much it is. So what can you do for it? Say I put it in middle of a traffic signal on the road, and I can actually start monitoring the noise levels over there, right? So in one phone, I just turn it on, I keep it over there, I know what is the sound that is coming over there. Now I record it over a period of hours and days and weeks and months. So I actually get a pattern to say, hey, at this point of time, this is how it is. Maybe in the nights it's quiet, everybody is sleeping, right? In maybe around 10 o'clock in the morning or 8 to 10, it is peak because everybody is going to office, and evening it is again in the peak because that's the most noises, right? So that's one example of one system and one traffic point. Now assume that all of you, all the friends, all the students of your class actually have it all across. Okay? So you have the same sound meter that is spread across your village or your town or your district, right? So all of a sudden you're getting data from multiple places, right? So that is what is called a system, right? Now you're not having one data, but you're having like hundreds of data, thousands of data. Imagine a system where, say for example, we look at this real-time air pollution that is happening, right? That across the world, people are tracking this. So if you look at it, this actually tells you how the trends are. How is it today? Is it good? Is it bad? Or is there something you can do about it? Right? That is what is happening in Delhi and many places, right? They know that, hey, in this season, this is bad because of environmental conditions, because of our lifestyle and habits and the agriculture conditions. And what can we do about it, right? That's exactly what we are going to do. So for example, look at this. So if you look at this, you can see it, right? You can see each one of the place what it is, right? You can see that it's pretty moderate over here, and it has been pretty much updated just about an hour ago. And then you can see here it's very unhealthy for sensitive groups. It's very clear, right? So all you did was you just took one small sensor, which is a pollution sensor, air quality index, and then you started mapping it across. And now, before you know, you actually have a complete world map, complete India map, where you can actually see what is the overall health of it, right? And once you know, there is a lot of things that you can do about it. Maybe you're sensitive for, and you're having some asthma or bronchitis, allergic bronchitis, and you want to avoid few things, maybe some pollen. So you can actually start looking at it and see whether it's actually useful for you or not. Okay? That's one example. Then let us look at a slightly different example. Let us look at a smart home, right? And here, again, this is a very basic one and everybody knows about it, right? So let us and see what kind of sensors are there inside it. So this is your camera, right? Which is actually keeping you safe. Who is coming in and whether he is a friend or a foe, right? So now this is a simple camera, and then you're looking at it and saying yes. But what if it is a smart camera, right? It can actually see that, hey, you're a family member, and it automatically opens the door for you. If you look at it right here, earlier we were looking at one sensor, one type of sensor, right? So here it is heterogeneous sensors. You have your smart clocks, you have your smart cameras, and then you have temperature monitors, and you have your safety systems that are in house, and they're actually working together with you, right? It says, hey, you're going on a vacation. Shall I set the house in vacation mode? So what does that mean, right? So the house knows that you're traveling. House knows that nobody is going to be in the house, right? And the third thing is it has to protect. So when you say it is vacation mode, it's not just about turning off all the lights and ACs and saving the energy, right? It's about keeping it safe, right? If somebody comes in, right, it has to send an alert. Hey, there is a break-in, right? Or there is a possible break-in. Right? It has to alert maybe your neighbors, maybe your nearby police, or and the best thing, right, is inform you or take some remedial actions, right? Maybe it can trigger some alarms, maybe it can deter that, right? And look at it the other way, right? So it's a smart lock you have. You know, the two kids, both of the brother and the sister is coming. Brother is coming at 3:30, and the sister is coming at like 4:30. If somebody doesn't come at 3:30, which is the regular time, it can actually send out an alert telling that, hey, the elder son is supposed to come at 3:30 today, but he didn't come, right? So it knows that you're not at home and you're not monitoring actively. But if the person is not turning up at that time, you actually know, and there is a reason to be cautious and take some actions. And especially if you're actually your grandparents, imagine a situation where your grandparents are staying away from you, right? Your grandmom generally winds up all her outside work, friends and everything and comes back by 7 o'clock. So one fine day she didn't come. So what do? You don't know. You're staying away. You're staying in Bangalore, Delhi, wherever you're working. There is no way you can know about it. But what if the system learns that from the habit that, hey, every day the person is coming before or latest by 7 o'clock, but today it's 8:30, but the person still hasn't come. It can send you a message and you can actually call back your grandmom and say, hey, granny, are you fine? Where are you? Right? Maybe she's just enjoying having a nice time with her friends or with a dentist or with anything else, right? But you know there is something and you can act about it, right? So that's the beauty. That's what we're talking about, right? Knowing about something and taking an action about it. Going on to the slightly complicated one, right? Example, right? This is from a smart city project that we have done in Electronic City, Bangalore, a few years back. So the one challenge that comes in is the road safety, right? People are crossing. It's an office zone, heavily office zone. There's a lot of traffic, both vehicular traffic and people crossing. It's not feasible to have a traffic constable at each and every corner, right? It's very tough to gather the data and make a decision. We fit in a couple of sensors into the vehicles, into the municipal vehicles, and then they started moving over there. So we had all these cameras which were sensing the pedestrians and the traffics and all the things, right? And then we said, hey, what is it? How is it over a period of time? So if what you're looking at is that, right? The interesting thing is, hey, at this hour, between 12 to 1 is the peak. And that is where around the lunchtime, we see that there's a lot of collision possibilities. And the highest that we are seeing is Thursdays and Fridays, right? So Thursday and Friday, and between 12 to 13, right? So that is like around lunchtime is when. So that is when it came up that a lot of people as the weekend comes in, all the officers, people are going out for lunch as a team, and then all the roads are getting chock-a-block over there because of that. The hotels are there on either side. Right? And if you look at the graph, it clearly identifies the various spots where it is there, which is the highest risk of being there. You have to prioritize which areas that you have to monitor closely. If you want to put a traffic constable, or you want to put a signals, or you want to do something, speed breakers or something, these are the places. So going on to the next one, right? This is one interesting one that is done in the city of Fargo in US. So it's basically what they did was they took all the data, right? The crime data, and then they started documenting it. And they generated very interesting data over there. You can actually see, hey, which months is the crime that is high, right? You can actually see the summer months and the winter months and the snowing months, and you can actually see at around what time is it, right? And what exactly are the reasons for the crime. So that actually tells you a lot of detail. It says to the common man, it says that, hey, the administration is actually monitoring it and they're taking steps to remedy that. And you know which areas you want to avoid. Or if you are moving into some space and if there is some sensitivity around some space, you can actually avoid that. So there's a lot of tracking that happens and a lot of actions that happen over this. So let's take another example, right? A very simple one that is happening in our own country, a lot of smart cities, right, in India. So if you look at it, this particular dashboard is the smart lighting, and this is done around the Vijayawada airport corridor, right? You can actually see it, right? You can actually see all the lights that are mapped, and you can actually see what is the status of it. Hey, this light is off, that's good, right? And what happened to this? It clearly says there's a lamp failure, right? So basically, you know, you're sitting, there's no person who is going there, who's trying to see whether the lights are on or not. Nobody has to complain. You can just see it from remote on your dashboard, and you can actually trigger it, right? It's very simple to integrate the system, and I'm sure they would have done it to the nearest lineman or the office who will take care and say, hey, lamppost number 856, right? The light is not working. Go and replace it or check, right? It's so much of automation happens, and then it makes the life so much easier, right? It's all about citizen services and safety, right? Nobody wants to walk around in a dark alley. And you'll see that most of the lights are off now because it's like recording in the afternoon, right? So most of the things are afternoon. So it's all smart lighting that comes in. Another example that we'll go is slightly into healthcare, right? So if you look at the photo here, right? So this is about breast cancer detection. So this is one problem for the ladies. As they grow, as they age, these problems will come up. Now, it's very tough to identify the problem. So what they have done is, right, this particular company, they take a thermal scan, right? It's not a regular scan, a thermal X-ray. They take the data, they do the recording, and then the recording goes to the cloud, and in the cloud, the processing happens, right? It will look at all the thermal signatures, right? The sensitive ones, it will be able to differentiate it and then says, hey, there is a heavy possibility of a tumor or a mass that is forming over here. The advantage is in the traditional method where the radiologists and experts are looking for the human eye to identify, it has to be a certain size and certain mass. But here, because it's computer and it's very high resolution and accuracy level, it can actually flag much, much smaller ones. So that means you don't have to wait for much later in the day in your age to actually come to know about it. So this is all the prediction that will happen. So the graph that you're seeing here, this is about the taxi services, right? This is all the planning that is happening. Hey, at any point of time, what is the demand? Where is the demand and where are your vehicles and how are you going to spread across the vehicles so that when a person wants to call for a taxi, it's much more faster. So example like this, a lot of things that are there. Right? So now, right, we looked at the examples. So this is all about data, right? It's about whether you collected data from physical or you have already gathered the data like the digital website. It could be pricing information, it could be citizen information, it could be demographic information or your agriculture information, and then what you can do. So this is just one example, the data.gov.in. This is from our own Indian government. If you go to this website, you can actually find tons of data. It's traffic, agriculture, prices, weather information, health information, economic details, industry, different types of industry, outputs, GDP. You'll find so much of information. So anything you're interested in, you can go look at the data that is there. And then over the next few days and years, as you learn more about it, you can actually start creating your own models about it. So one example, in one of the session that we had previously, a student from outside of India, they actually took the prices of cabbage, and then they said, hey, the yield of cabbage, the environmental impact, and the prices, and then they correlated, and then they said, hey, they created a prediction system which can say at any point of time what will be the cost of the cabbage, right? So it was a very nice, interesting one that was done by students pretty much of your age. So whatever you are interested, just see how you can find the data and what you can do about it. So now coming back, right, to summarize what we have looked at, right? The first thing is connected, right? You have the sensor data, whether it is physical or digital. The first thing is you have to bring it together, right? Everything should be coming in together. That's the first thing when you're building a system. The next thing is smart. How smart is it, right? What kind of decisions can it make by itself? The light is off, but the time now is like night 10 o'clock. Why is the light off? Can I send a message telling to the nearest lineman saying that the light is off, go and fix it? Right? That's smartness, right? Now, the predictions and intelligence, it comes in when it says that, hey, over a period of time, it develops that, hey, this particular light has a life of, say, 5,000 hours. So as it comes closer to that, the rate of failure is very high. So if it builds that intelligence and gives a guidance telling that keep a stock of 10% of the total lights installed because you will need it over the next 3 months. Okay, because this is the phase, right? Most of the lights are coming onto that. So this is the intelligence that will come in, which will give you, help you with predictive maintenance and which will actually save a lot of money and a lot of safety for the people. And this is slightly on a different way, right? So we looked at sensors, we said data, we need to do anything. But how does the data flow from the time it is gathered to the time that it is acted upon, right? That is what we are trying to look at it, a quick overview of it. So the first thing on the left, if you see, is your devices, right? You have your video for surveillance, you have the manufacturing data, healthcare data, buildings, any field that you take it, right? This is all individual data that is there. Now, this is what you have to send it. So when you take a cell phone, right, all the sensors, all the data, everything is going through one connection. Now, if you have in your house, take typical house, take a guess, how many smart devices can you fit in? If you convert every switch, every light, every fan, every appliance, your mixie and geysers and your AC and everything into smart, right? It will run into hundreds. Now, do you want to put 100 connections directly on it and send to the cloud, or do you want to put a gateway? All the things can get aggregated into a gateway, like your today's broadband gateway or DSL gateway that is there, and then it can actually go to the net. So once it goes to the cloud, that is where it will start aggregating it. The data will start getting analyzed. It will start getting organized in a proper fashion. You have structured data and unstructured data, and then there will be a lot of filtering that happens because all the data that is coming in from the devices may be correct, may not be correct. For some things, Low accuracy is okay, but for few things you need high accurate data. It depends on the application. Maybe for an industrial, you need very high accurate, because if a temperature goes beyond certain time, maybe you want to trigger a fire alarm or a safety alert, right? But whereas in a normal monitoring, if a little bit of a half a degree or 1 degree difference is there, it will not make much of a sense. So depending on the application, you'll have to see whether the data is good or not, right? So once that is coming, you'll start processing the data, right? This is where all your actionable insights, all your algorithms that are there, the data churning and everything will start over here, right? So once that comes in, again, it will go back. The actions will go back into the system as per remedial actions, what to do about with it. So just a slightly different one on this, right? We're looking at data and we said, hey, do you want to directly talk to the cloud or do you want to do locally, right? Just take the example of the autonomous cars over today. You know, a lot of companies are working and we know that it's complicated. Everybody's trying level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, 5 and everything. Right? But if you look at a fundamental level, what are the sensors that are there? Right? You can see it. You have these cameras, right? Each camera is generating about 20 to 40 MB of data. Right? You have your leaders, right? Which using your cameras and leader, you actually try to identify the surrounding, the objects, whether it is a car, whether it's a vehicle, or whether it's a person, whether it is a speed limit, right? The traffic signals and everything. And then your sonar, right? It's about, that's very slow one, about 100 kilobytes per second. Right? So much of data is coming in. It's not practical for you to send it to cloud and then wait for something to happen, right? So all these things will get started processing locally. Right? Because if a pedestrian comes opposite, you have to brake in a split second and you have to stop. Right? You can't wait for the data to go to the cloud, get processed and come. Right? So that's the amount of data that gets over here, and that's the decision making. On the related one, right? If you look at it, we touched on this. Each industry or each application will have its own requirement, right? On the industrial one, you may need a very fast decision making, right? On mission critical, it could be medical, right? In a OT, right? You want to immediately react over there, right? It's the safety of the people over there. Or in when a car is traveling at 100 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour, you have to make split second decisions, right? So the latency of the decision, the data availability and decision making has to happen very fast. Whereas if it is in a different kind of a situation, yeah, you're taking a pollution monitoring, it generally doesn't change in a minutes or anything, right? It takes a little bit of more time. So you can take the data and then you can say for example, you take the case of a traffic. Right? So a signal, there is a lot of traffic monitoring that cameras that are being installed in India and everywhere. Right? So if a person breaks a signal, jumps a red light and goes, yeah, you want to find him, but do you want to catch him right at that moment? May not. The data can store locally. It can go later into the central systems, and the person you can do the recognition, the number plate recognition. You can identify the person, and you can always send him the challan or the fine, or you can call him into the court or whatever you will do. Right? It's not emergency. So depending on your requirement, it depends how you are going to design the system. So like that, there are a lot of applications that you want to do as you go through each vertical. If you look at packaging, if you look at industry, right, it gets in. Say, for example, you all go into shopping malls or grocery stores and you buy it, right? You look at the label. There is a very clear requirement on the label to say, where is it manufactured, when is it manufactured, and what is the price, and before when, what is the best use. These are your statutory requirements, government requirements, and you have to have it. If it's not there, the company is liable to answer and there could be fines about it. So they take it very seriously. The number of shampoo bottles and soap bottles that are coming out of a factory, maybe it is tough to monitor it, right? So you can have a simple visual system which is actually tracking the label and say, yes, all this information is present or not. So that's the simplest of the examples. But if the advanced ones are in machineries, you have so many nuts and bolts and screws that are coming from the conveyor belt, which are manufacturing. You can have a camera, smart camera, which is looking at it and which can say, hey, yes, the groove within the screws has to be this much of thickness, but there is a defect. It can actually identify the defect and then it can get that kicked out at the conveyor belt there itself. It doesn't have to travel all the way to the end user and then get rejected there. Right? These are all your safeties and optimizations. Okay, so that's pretty much kind of what we wanted to know, right? So you understand what is the data, how we are collecting it, and how that gets into various phases, right? From the collection to the gathering to the actions and utilization of the actions. So all the best for your next few sessions and hope you enjoy all the classes. Thank you.
Hi, good evening to all of you on behalf of Intel. And I'd like to firstly congratulate the government of India for having taken this audacious effort to skill as many students on artificial intelligence. It's my honor and privilege to invite my friend Riccardo Masucci. He's the global director for public policy in Intel. He's based out of Brussels, therefore he has vast exposure working with governments and parliamentarians in Europe, US, India, China, and so on and so forth. And I also have the privilege of working with him extremely closely as I look at regulations around these spaces in India. He's an expert on privacy and also has immense knowledge about cybersecurity and related trends across the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Riccardo.
Thanks, Kishore. I'm delighted to be here with you all today. Allow me to add my congratulations to the government of India for this wonderful initiative, and also thank the organizers for the opportunity to be here with you and participate to this fantastic event today. I wish I could be there with you in person, but I hope there will be future opportunities.
To me, artificial intelligence is the future. I love the way AI is beginning to impact humanity in India today. The possibilities it creates for a country like that of ours is immense. Imagine disease detection at scale, precision medicine at scale, autonomous cars, collision avoidance. I'm just marveled by the impact AI can actually have on all of us. And I also love the way AI and the topic of AI today has come into prominence and in public debate today. And surely by the timing of it, India is opportune and well opportunely placed to leverage from AI. You all know India is entering a golden period of demographic dividend. There are so many youth out there like you who, when skilled on futuristic technology like AI, can do wonders for the country. All this advancement has been possible surely because of the compute capability increasing. Today, the compute capability that a normal machine has the capability to compute at scale, to access information from very, very large data sets, throw out inferences, and enable seamless scaling of artificial intelligence. Compute is actually the key to enable artificial intelligence. Having said that, another critical element that plays, another buzzword rather, that plays a critical role today is data, right? So you have AI and you have data. So how is this barrage of data that's going to be coming up in, in AI as the solutions begin to scale, affecting the privacy and data protection? That's the first question I'll have for you.
You're right, Kishore. We live in a data-intensive society where data processing and analytics happens across the whole digital infrastructure, at the edge, on our smartphones, on the network, and in the data centers. The presence of billions of devices, we estimate over 28 billion by 2022, will just increase all the mechanisms to data collection. Data today is shared by users, but is also gathered by sensors and derived by algorithms. With this big amount of data available, AI uses this wealth of information to make autonomous determinations. And in some cases, take for instance, banking, human resources, or other sectors, these decisions may affect individuals, their lives, their physical safety, even their position in the society or their social interactions. So there is a potential for harm for individuals, and this may result in discrimination, restriction of choices, as well as economic harm.
Okay, having spoken about how AI is going to be becoming large and how data and privacy is going to play center stage, I clearly see that these risks that are coming out require more attention. Personal data needs to be protected in some way so that no harm is done to the citizen, right? What would be your view?
This is very true, Kishore. Traditional privacy data protection aims to prevent unauthorized access to data, to avoid modification or loss of personal information. The overall goal is to respect private life, family life, confidentiality of our communications. In the context of AI, these goals still hold true. But in the current tech landscape, the increasing volume of data and the use of AI are a game changer for privacy and data protection. Besides those risks of discrimination and restriction of choices and economic harm that I mentioned, AI adds a further layer of complexity in case of misuse. Because of the AI potential to create false information, images, sounds, videos, etc., that could manipulate individuals and their realities. False information can impact the way others see us, our identity, our personality, our personhood. Take also the example of fake news. Some ill-intentioned organizations may try to change the way we perceive the external reality. And this could be, for instance, levers to influence electoral processes or to exercise control, surveillance over specific groups of specific portions of population in non-democratic regimes.
Thanks, Riccardo. You said one of the risks is discrimination. This may depend on biased data sets. To protect citizens' privacy, we need reliable, accurate, and clear data sets. Why is the quality of data so important in today's context?
Accurate data helps AI making more accurate predictions and evaluations, hence taking more accurate decisions. Promoting diversity in data sets, for instance, can help reduce the risk of unintended bias. In AI for healthcare, for instance, and in countries where the population is very diverse, like in India, it is important that data from different minorities is included in the training data sets so that the result is also more accurate and does not preclude appropriate medical treatment to portions of society. The ability for research organizations to transfer data internationally also reinforces the opportunity of using very diverse data sets. And this is one element, for instance, that governments should encourage through cross-border data flows.
I think privacy is the most important thing one needs to have to enjoy the opportunities AI creates for us, right? So for us to really leverage from AI, privacy becomes very, very critical. I understand that. I'm sure people worry that increased automation would lead to, increased risk of privacy. How does one manage privacy in such fast-changing context?
Thanks, Kishore. Risk management is really key, and it starts from accountability of organizations. So with the commitment of public and private organizations to create privacy and security policies that comprise tools and trainings that promote internal oversight and external verification, and that ensure also means for remediation in case of privacy breaches and violations. Privacy by design approaches that embed privacy impact assessments throughout the design and production process are, for instance, a very good example of accountability and should apply across the entire AI ecosystem. Responsible companies have developed product development lifecycle, which include impact assessment and balancing tests to measure privacy and security risks of artificial intelligence-based technologies. So we have from design to market release, we have engineers and analysts that evaluate at each step potential unintended consequences for end users, and they suggest additional features or they find alternative solutions to minimize those risks. Take, for example, anonymous video analytics software. It can extract information, it stores this information as a log file and discards the images. Image blurring of faces or car plates is another technique for minimizing risks of linking identifiers to individuals. Differential privacy, for instance, is an interesting technique that adds some randomness, noise to a data set so that individuals in the original training data set cannot be re-identified from the AI model used for inference at a later stage. In general, what we want is to minimize the gap between what is collected and what is needed for AI inference. This may mean converting the data to a less informative format or using sensors that collect less information. We may want to extract some features and not record the entire raw data. We may want to keep raw data separately for labeling, but then we may want to delete this raw data and store just the high-level features. In addition to these practices, we can also list anonymization and encryption as effective ways to address privacy and security concerns, because they still enable some computational tasks without exposing data to unauthorized access, modification, loss, or deletion.
Well, your talk on privacy is definitely reassuring, right? I agree organizations should embrace accountability to minimize privacy risk. You just mentioned anonymization and encryption. Can we actually look at these as silver bullets to build an AI future for AI development? What would be your views?
This is a very good question, Kishore. A very prominent area of research is privacy-preserving machine learning, an emerging set of technologies that leverage cryptographic and statistical tools to allow for complex computation while minimizing the risk to expose personal and sensitive data. These are important privacy-preserving technologies and a very significant focus for AI research at Intel. It is important to say that these technologies have different degrees of performance, scalability, usability. Some, like trusted execution environments or differential privacy, are currently deployed at a large scale, for instance, in AI-based cloud services. Others, like homomorphic encryption, will need to improve, but they have already made outstanding progress just in the last few years because of the exponential growth in computing capabilities. Recently, Intel has announced a collaboration with the University of Pennsylvania to use federated learning and other privacy-preserving machine learning techniques to identify brain tumors. Actually, a federation of 29 international healthcare and research institutions will be able to improve the AI model through federated learning without actually sharing the data sets containing very sensitive data, which is indeed healthcare data. So this is a bright example of how privacy-preserving machine learning techniques can help addressing privacy and security issues, but we cannot consider them just as a silver bullet, right? Each technique can contribute to minimize access to very sensitive personal data, but it will work best in combination with traditional organizational safeguards like internal privacy policies and very specific rules to define data access and data retention. In general, I would say that we need more research and investments to help making all these privacy-preserving machine learning techniques more mainstream. It is worth noting that some of these technical measures to minimize privacy and security risks may also require additional IT capabilities, additional computing power capabilities. And for this reason, smaller businesses may not be able to implement those techniques quickly.
Okay, so let me summarize what we've discussed so far. Yes, autonomous decisions create a new risk, a risk of that of privacy and protection of personal information. But having said that, there are ways to minimize that risk, right? Privacy by design, etc. All those you spoke about are very relevant. But governments around the world are thinking about regulating AI. Now, what are your views about that?
This is a $1 million question, Kishore. AI is really context specific, and there is no one size fits all kind of regulation or standard that would apply to the breadth of AI ecosystems, users, and use cases. I think that AI applications are different and related risks are different. So take, for instance, AI-based industrial quality control mechanisms. They may not deserve human oversight when they single out a defective product. On the contrary, if an algorithm excludes a candidate in a job selection procedure or a patient for treatment eligibility, well, there would be a reasonable expectation, right, from individuals, and there would be also public interest to have at some point some human involvement and some oversight of the decision making. In general, I think that tech-neutral and principle-based legislation offer the best, most flexible, most adaptable path to address future data uses and technologies that either fall outside the existing laws or that are still unforeseen. At this stage, I think it seems to me more reasonable to minimize AI-centric legislation. We should rather promote international voluntary standards and have a more predictable enforcement of existing rules in the context of new technologies. To this purpose, governments should work with industry, with civil society, with academia to identify those situations that are more high risk and where maybe new rules may be needed to provide the necessary trust. 2 days ago, 40 member states of the European Union have published a paper calling for a proportionate, future-proof AI regulatory framework, an approach well calibrated on risks and based also on evidence. I think that this can be a way, for instance, to drive innovation and economic growth. So in conclusion, back to your question, I think that soft law and standardization could be the preferred path that countries may want to look at instead of taking heavy-handed regulatory approaches at the moment.
Yes, of course, Riccardo. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sure you're aware of various proactive AI policy discussions the government is actually having with industry, we inclusive, for necessary trust in technology. I agree that the government has to play a critical role in improving access to data. Open government data is a very good example, in my view, on how governments could go about data. Making public data available, in fact, quality public data available that are structured, accessible, and available for startups and students and the community by and large would boost innovation, startups, and creation of small enterprise and jobs. What would be your take on that?
I totally agree with your assessment, Kishore. Data policies are crucial to foster economic growth through a broader adoption of innovative technologies like AI. There are very good examples of open data strategies around the world. The European Union, for example, has updated its law for the reuse of public sector information last year. Public sector in Europe is one of the most data-intensive sector. Imagine, Kishore, that its economic value is expected to increase from 52 billion in 2018 to 194 billion in 2030. When we talk about public data, we refer to text, audio, video files, and any content that is held by public sector bodies, museums, library, archives. Since 2015, there is an EU data portal, which is a pan-European repository for public data, which is open for access and for reuse. So I think that similar initiatives could successfully stimulate creativity of startups and could really drive new businesses and services.
Well, I agree. Open data usually is non-personal data, but personal data is usually protected by consent of individual. I think consent is a good power that we can vest in the hands of citizens for them to feel empowered when they interact with technology. They have control over their own data. What is your take on consent and how do we manage it going forward when this explosion of data in future technologies happen?
Yes, Kishore, consent still has an important role to play in our ever-changing technology environment. However, the traditional notice and consent model might not be viable today in many situations. In some cases, for instance, consent may not be obtained. But take also situations like autonomous driving, where you have drivers, where you have passengers, where you have pedestrians. How can you get explicit consent and ensure safety in real time? So it is worth considering then other legal bases other than consent, like legitimate interest of the entity processing personal data. This reasonable interest should not serve as a blank authorization to process data, but should actually work in concert with accountability, with additional safeguards of organizations for individuals. A good examples of other legal bases for the data processing comes from the healthcare sector. Actually, countries like Finland, Israel, France have successfully explored the possibility for secondary use of health data based on public interest as a legal ground. This can boost healthcare research if done in combination with appropriate safeguards. So these countries have decided that for research purposes, consent to process health data is not required. But this data is still protected through the identification techniques like pseudonymization, anonymization, data aggregations. There are also some solid processing controls in place, like data use agreements or secure environments. And there are also other safeguards, such as internal review boards that are foreseen. So this is a very promising path that I believe other countries should consider when outlining their data strategies.
Well, Riccardo, AI for social impact is an extremely interesting space. I believe that the opportunity AI for social impact has in India, in a country like India, which is hugely, vastly spread across several tiers and states, is immense. In fact, only last week, the government of India hosted India's largest AI summit, the Race to 2020 conference, where the Prime Minister emphasized on the unprecedented opportunities AI throws up in developmental segments like agriculture, mobility, urban planning, so on and so forth. I'm sure you know, India, the IT boom in India has been severely led by the IT services business, right? We are used to providing services on IT to the rest of the world. We are therefore the back office of IT services business. An experience in that, I think, places India extremely well in becoming the AI capital or the AI back office to the world, because we surely know how to manage, how to leverage our vast, capable workforce to serve the global demand.
Sure, I agree with you. Training and education will make a huge difference in translating this aspiration to a solid reality. Continuous education is the strongest and most effective approach to create a workforce that is ready for AI. In my view, the commitment by governments should be twofold. On the one hand, creating a workforce that develops AI, and on the other hand, creating a workforce that uses AI. To this purpose, it would be very important to drive investments in higher education for engineering, data science, but also make sure that there are scholarships and grants available for a larger number of students across the country, so that they will have the necessary knowledge to develop new innovative uses of data and artificial intelligence. These investments would also give equal opportunities to access hard science university curricula to talented male and female students, as well as to minorities and to less affluent people. Investments, in my view, are also needed to retrain workers, to give them those necessary skills for being more productive and being able to leverage AI systems in the current working environment. We may also consider the fact that some jobs might be disrupted by increasing automation. So appropriate mitigations and financial support should also be foreseen in this context.
Well, I realized during this chat, you've mentioned several times security. I think security is the fundamental element of trust in technology. Over the recent past, thanks to COVID, an unprecedented number of people getting online, and also due to some geopolitical issues that you may well know of, India has been exposed to a barrage of cybersecurity attacks. Now, how does AI change the cybersecurity landscape?
You're raising a very good point, Kishore, and the answer here is not really easy. The bad news is that AI brings scale, speed, and distribution of cyber attacks to a more complex level compared to traditional security threats. So the current situation and the current tech landscape would require more investments in cyber resilience and cyber preparedness. The good news, though, is that AI systems can be used to predict cyber attacks. Hence, AI can be used for cybersecurity purposes, and it is proven that AI can significantly improve also our defenses. In the end, we need data to protect data. And so we also should think of making sure that organizations have adequate legal basis for data processing in the context of network and information security. Also, confidentiality, integrity, availability of data remain key cybersecurity priorities. And in some cases, cyber threats to AI workloads are similar to threats to other technical applications, because they, there are some attacks that affect the protection, the integrity of data, they compromise computation, they lead to denial of service, they can cause information leakage. But we need also to consider new forms of attacks, such as adversarial machine learning attacks. And these attacks, through minor alterations to the input data, can actually manipulate or poison machine learning outcomes. Recent studies have showed how neural networks are vulnerable to the presence of subliminal signals, which can actually cause serious harm by influencing the cognitive function of neural networks. These signals usually pass unnoticed by humans, but may cause neural networks to misclassify their input, and so to learn the wrong things from the outside world, from the environment. And so this would result in potentially harmful outputs of machine learning.
Now, you also know several of us have been working from home. Cybersecurity awareness and preparedness may not be consistent across all of us, across professions, across learning abilities and knowledge. What do you think are the imperatives for cybersecurity among people?
I couldn't agree more with you, Kishore. Currently, cyber preparedness and cyber awareness are priorities. ENISA, which is the EU cybersecurity agency, has recently published some guidance for cyber hygiene in terms of COVID-19 and working from home. These suggestions, these recommendations include secure Wi-Fi connections, fully updated antivirus, periodic software updates, periodic backup of information, but also restricted access to sensitive information. And there is also the possibility for using encryption tools for instance, authentication, for secure remote connections to servers, or for electronic signatures. It is also important, in addition, to have clear processes and procedures in place in case of cyber incidents. Last but not least, since we spend a lot of our time every day in front of our screens reading emails, I think that attacks like phishing or ransomware are very good examples of why we should be cautious and even suspicious when we open our emails, because they are becoming increasingly a very serious threat for both private and professional users. I think in conclusion, we need really to increase cyber resilience of IT infrastructure, but we also need to increase cyber awareness and training across the board.
Hey, Riccardo, this session is truly, truly wonderful. But again, a lot of children out there on this call listening to us, a lot of things that we've spoken have been around how do governments, policymakers, institutions, and students get issues around privacy, security right. Now, specifically to the students who are listening to us today, is there anything that you would like to say that they should pay attention to?
Sure, and I hope I haven't been too tedious today with all these policy discussions. If I had to give 3 recommendations to our friends in the audience, I would say take the time to understand privacy and security issues. Many of you, for instance, might have been asked for parental consent today. Well, this is not just an administrative process. Don't take this like a tick in the box exercise. It is truly important. Protecting our privacy is protecting who we are, is protecting our identities, is protecting our choices. The second recommendation is role model responsible behaviors online, and talk about this with your peers. And the third recommendation is be proactive in making sure that our digital environment is secure. And if you see something that goes wrong, please flag it to the competent authorities.
Thank you very much, Riccardo. Thanks for actually having taken time in such short notice to join us from Brussels. Listening to you was wonderful, and I'm sure everybody out there listening to us would have found a lot of your comments extremely relevant. And this session would go a long way in preparing the youth who are listening to us be more sensitized to issues around privacy and security, and consider it every time they're out there interacting with people digitally or developing solutions which are going to really put India on the path to progress. Thanks a lot. Good evening.
It's an extreme pleasure for me to share a few of my thoughts on this new technology called 5G. And then I wanted to kind of give a little bit of background on wireless communication to begin with, because we don't want to directly get into this 5G things, right? So I wanted to kind of share with you what is mean by a wireless communication. Then I will take you through a journey of what called Gs, right? We'll start with 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, right? And then I wanted to share what that 5G means, right? To everyone's layman's term, what is it is changing, right? People are talking so big. So let's talk about few of the use cases or the behaviors that going to get changed with this introduction of this technology. Let's see what it is a wireless communication means. So typically for any communication, you need a transmitter and you need a receiver. When we say wireless communication, the medium is wireless, right? It's air, right? You are transmitting the content from the transmitter to the receiver via the air. So what it means, right? Let's look at this, right? If you look at this presentation, you can see the left-hand side is the sender, right? The sender wants to communicate, either he wants to talk like it's a speech, or he wants to text it, or he wants to convey the picture or a video, share the video with his friends, right? The receiver is sitting on the other side. Either he can waiting for the call from the sender, right, so that he can start the conversation, or he wants to see the picture or the text that is received from the his friend, right? Her friend in this case, right? So what it enables via this wireless communication, right? Let's look at it, right? So we start with what we call as information source, right? This is your sender. Sender is, let's say that he's going to send a picture to his friend, right? Her friend. That picture is encoded in digitized form, right? That you guys are very well aware what is JPEG format. Like when you take a picture, it gets stored in a digitized form. It's a pixel representation, right? These pixels are encoded in a binary form. It's stored in digital thing. Now this digital information gets packetized, and then it will send it across the world using a well-known protocol called internet protocol, right? But you guys are all aware of this, right? So when one PC is talking to another PC via the internet, that's what it is using, right? The internet protocol is the foundational block on which these communications are happening, right? So now the only difference is now this packet, what we call the internet protocol packet, needs to be sent it across the wireless channel. Now, how it can be done, right? So this information first gets processed in a digital domain, what we call it as the modulation, right? Because when you are sending some information in the air, you need to do a coding, make sure that you are compressing the content, also represent in a unique code. If any error happens, you should be able to detect the error and on the receive side so that you can flawlessly reproduce the content. Now, once you done the coding, you will modulate with the transmission signal, right? Because you need to transmit on a signal. That's it's called the modulation, right? This modulation happens in the digital domain. Then once you have created the content ready to be transferred to a radio, right? This is where actual transmission of the signal happens, right? This is where the antenna that you can see in the tower comes into picture, right? If you guys all see while walking on the road or like traveling, you can see a big steel structure like a tower on which a rectangular or a circular, these are all called antennas. We call it as the radio frequency antenna. The reason we say RF, the frequency that uses these transmitter antenna lies in the radio frequency ranges. That's why we call it as the RF antenna. So what we have done is we modulated digital signal in the antenna. It gets converted into an analog radio signal, then gets transmitted. So on the other hand, you will receive these radio signals. The radio signals are received by the your mobile equipment. Let's say that there is an antenna, a small antenna that's inside your mobile, right? It receives this signal. Then what happens? The reverse side of the transmission will happen. The reason is we'll do the demodulation first, extract the information out of the carrier signal, and then we will do the error correlation. Basically, if there are errors introduced during this transmission, we can easily detect and correct it so that we can reproduce the original content, and then you can reproduce the picture as we have seen in your phone, right? This is called fundamentals of wireless communication. So now, since we have seen what is the basic wireless communication means, now let's see the evolution of all the generation of this wireless communication. Let's start with second generation, is famously known as 2G. I don't know how many of you have used in during the 90s. We used to have a big phone, right? It's only primarily is used for communicating two human beings communicating wirelessly their voice communication, right? The whole fundamental behind this 2G wireless communication is to enable human beings contact each other and communicate via voice, right? So typically, before the wireless communication or the GSM days, we used to go to a phone booth or a telephone at home, and you communicate via that phone, right? It's what we call it as the wired phone. With the advent of this 2G technology, you are no longer to go to a phone. Phone is with you, right? You can make a call to your friend anytime you want, right? So this is the biggest change in the human behavior. It's happened, right? In terms of communication, right? Globally, anybody can talk to everyone at any point of time, right? That's the big change happened during 90s, right? After that, of course, right, we successfully succeeded transferring the voice on the wireless medium channel. Then natural evolution is, can we send the data, right? This is what happened with 3G. Between the 2G, second generation to third generation, there were multiple attempts or intermediate steps were taken place. We call it as edge or GPRS kind of terms. It was just helping transferring the text, or what we call the short form SMS, right? Short messaging service. Through text, you were able to communicate on the same medium, same technology that the second generation was having, right? But there was no large bandwidth data communication was taking place. But with the start of 3G technology, we started seeing that data can be transferred, right? Now you could see, I don't know if you guys remember this, there is an iPhone, first Apple introduced the iPhone, right? Using this 3G technology. This is when the whole app revolution, what we call mobile applications, is kick-started with this 3G, because now you can communicate the data. Here data means picture, voice, video, all these things. The introduction of applications, that means your mobile can become like a mini PC, and it can actually execute your applications. You no longer need to carry your laptop or your desktop to do the computation. The mobile is powerful enough to do the computation. The combination of the compute power and this wireless technology in terms of data communication enable what we call it as the app revolution, right? Now it's still limited because we are talking about the complete medium, right? One particular area, the whole wireless medium, we were able to communicate up to 40 Mbps, which is equivalent of what you have used to have it in your home, the Wi-Fi access router, right? This is what you get, 30 Mbps. But this is not good enough for us to transfer, right? If you start seeing the video, you can see the video gets keep on rotating because you don't have much bandwidth. If many people are getting onto the same transmit and receive that wireless medium, you naturally you need to share the bandwidth, right? Eventually you cannot get that experience, right? If you want to watch your IPL cricket match, you will not able to see that, get the feel, right, with the 3G, because you will keep on at every some point there will be a circle start rotating, right? So this was not a good experience. Hence the next generation came, we call it as the fourth generation. The fourth generation is the real evolution where the data rates has become much bigger, right, compared to the 3G, right? We are talking about up to 1 gigabits per second, right? The fundamental transition from third generation to fourth generation is the way you pack these digital bits into this frequency, right? The spectrum. The technology, underlying technology is fundamentally changed from 3G to 4G. Hence, you are able to pack more bits in this and you are able to send. Now, what all you guys are experiencing currently is on 4G network. So you can see there are many applications, real-time applications are enabled using this 4G technology. Now, what else is there, right? With 5G. This is what 5G is going to transition completely in multiple vector, right? Remember, 2G was just human to human voice communication. 3G was ability to send data. 4G was experience of complete data on your mobile, right? But 5G is going beyond just data, right? 5G is going to change the life in many folds, right? Let's see what are those, right, in our next section. Now, with 5G, we are going to segregate into three fundamental pillars we call, right? First, of course, is enhanced mobile broadband. What it means is I'm going to send 10x to 100x kind of a data in the 5G time frame. For example, if I'm able to communicate 1 gig of traffic, 1 gigabits per second traffic on the wireless medium channel, in 5G, we are talking about 10 gigabits per second, right? That's, we call it as the enhanced mobile broadband. Now, what happens with this mobile, this enhanced data? Now you can see that in your phone, what we call it as the augmented reality, right? When you open your phone nowadays, you can open your camera and you can type something, the character, like whether it's a tiger, it's a whatever the character that you type, it will get augmented in your camera, right? Your camera is looking at the real life status of the picture. On that, your object is getting superimposed. We call it as that's a augmented reality. But the whole thing is happening in your mobile. But what happens, your friend wants to change, or an application guy wants to change that augmentation, right? You want to create an in-stadium viewing, right? An IPL match is going on. Now you want sitting at this, what you are watching is just the 2D picture, right? You're not viewing the 3D view of the real cricket match is going on. What will happen with this 5G technology is, with your AR headset, the IPL match is actually streamed in the 3D way, right? And then you can imagine yourself, like you can have many competition that, like if you can replace your favorite player like Dhoni with yourself, right? You can augment yourself as your Dhoni as a character and you can play, right? So there are games you can make it happen. There are multiple such innovation is possible with enhanced mobile broadband, right? That's one category. The next category, what it does, right? 5G is just not about higher data speed. 5G is all about, you can connect now millions of devices. Remember, in the time frame like 2G, 3G, we were talking about human to human communication, right? Or human to machine communication. When we say human to machine, if you are opening an app, the app is contacting backend a machine or a server, which is giving you the content, right? When we say human to human, you are making a call and you are talking to another person. But in starting with 4G, what we call it as the machine to machine. That means device to device. There is no human is involved. For example, a traffic signal, right? The traffic signals can be completely automated using this machine to machine communication. Or for example, in the agriculture sector, you can completely automate, collect the data from the sensors that you put on the field, and then you can control the sprinklers and other things based on the data you are getting it from the sensor, and you can control it. There are many use cases out there, right? Which is purely a machine to machine communication without involving a human intervention, right? So this will be massively enabled with 5G. 5G has a capability to connect with massively amount of machine to machines, right? Devices can get onto this network. Whereas 4G had a limitation, the number of connected devices is limited. But with 5G technology, we are enabling this. So that means there are n number of things that you will start seeing with this massive machine to machine communication. Finally, there is what we call ultra reliable low latency. This you can think about it like, typically when you make a communication, what we call, there is a standard round trip delay. The delay includes, you will wait for the when you are trying to transmit on a wireless channel, you wait for a grand signal before you can get on transmit your data, right? And then that data goes via the internet back to the person, and then that person replies back. There are many, what we call it as the long life round trip delay. But even within your like your mobile phone and the tower, the delay is much higher till 4G. With 5G, we are talking about in terms of microsecond delay, right? It's not in terms of millisecond delay, which means that you can actually do many use cases. For example, you can enable a live surgery or a remote live surgery with this technology, right? Your doctor may not able to attend, but there is an emergency. He can give guidance with this low latency services. Or you can think about, in a factory, you can control the robot based on the images that it captures, right? For example, in an assembly line, there is a faulty part, a camera detects it, then you can loop it back with the wireless technology so that you can control the robot sitting on the same assembly line and pick it up, right? So these kind of low latency examples that you can do, right? This is 5G. But what more the 5G can do? You can, what we call this new area that getting developed, it's called artificial intelligence, right? AI is going to play a bigger role with this 5G technology, because imagine you are getting into a school, right? What you do normally, a security come and checks your ID card, validates you are the person that is being displayed in the ID card, then he allows you inside the school. But with 5G, what you can do is, with the machine-to-machine, low latency, enhanced mobile brand, combination of this technology, all you have is a camera in front of your school. You walk in, camera captures your image, right? Transmit back, you do the analytics, you matches with your database, existing database, it confirms that you are the person, right? And then the control signal goes back to the gate opens, right? There is absolutely no human involvement. There is a media AI analytics behind to match what we call the face recognition, right? And then the control back to allow, right? These kind of new behaviors you can see that will be coming up with 5G, right? This is just the glimpse that I have introduced. You can read about this 5G technology, all these things. You can view it in multiple YouTube channel. You can Google it. You can search. You can find many interesting things. Thanks for listening. Thank you.